Is intimacy with an actor more meaningful than loyalty to your spouse? Today's narrative follows a similar theme. Enjoy the story. My wife Abby adored going to the cinema. To make her happy, all I needed to do was take her to an entertaining film. I couldn't just bring her to any film, it had to fall into one of 4 genres: animation, action, adventure, drama, or romance. Abby also attended nearly every film featuring Tom Torino, Matt Wright, or Brad Talbot, as they were her preferred actors. Our initial date involved watching Sleepless in Seattle. Although she wasn't a fan of Tom Hanks, she cherished the plot. Many years into our marriage, she confessed that she fell in love with me during that film, though why she felt so, I can't fathom. After 12 years of marriage, Abby remains strikingly beautiful. She stands 5'6" tall and weighs 155 lbs, boasting a splendid physique, and her deep emerald green eyes dramatically contrast her raven black hair. Whenever Abby dresses for an outing, she still captures the attention of men. I'm John Sawyer, and I'm quite presentable myself. Standing 6'1" and weighing 180 lbs with sandy hair and blue eyes. Abby and I have often been praised as an attractive pair. In college, before I met my future wife, I enjoyed the company of various women. But meeting Abby changed everything. I realized she was the one I wanted. We thought our mutual feelings would last forever. We met in our first year, and our affection deepened over our 4 years at a state university, leading us to marry 3 months post-graduation. Abby is my everything, my true love and soul. I cannot envision a life without her, although we deeply adore our 2 children. Our moments alone are particularly precious. Tonight was meant to be an exclusive evening for us. We planned to dance with 3 other couples, anticipating a late night, so we booked hotel rooms downtown and arranged for my parents to take our daughters for the night, making it an exceptionally special occasion. However, the night unfolded unexpectedly. At the nightclub, I was puzzled by the sudden shift in atmosphere. The women seemed anxious, and one of the men appeared smug. Of the 3 couples, I particularly liked George and Helen, and Bob and Anna. George worked as a software engineer, and Helen was a homemaker with 3 children. Bob ran his plumbing business, and his wife managed the bookkeeping. The only couple I found less agreeable were Chad and Thelma. Although I enjoyed Thelma's company, she and Abby were college roommates and stayed close. I found Chad objectionable. From what I understood, he was involved in the film industry, possibly as an agent, though not a notably successful one, while Thelma earned well as a pharmaceutical sales representative. Professionally, I am a financial advisor at a major brokerage firm. Initially, business was slow, but it has since picked up significantly. At my firm, once advisors accumulate a certain number of clients, they are encouraged to mentor a newcomer and redistribute some clients, keeping the most profitable ones. I have already undergone this process twice and am nearing a third. My earnings are quite satisfactory. Abby started working as an administrative assistant for Mike Winston, an executive vice president at a regional bank, and became a stay-at-home mum when our daughters were born close together. She returned to work when our youngest, Stacy, began first grade. Then one day, Mike contacted her and declared that he had been elevated to president, and he was curious if she would be keen on working for him part-time. Abby consulted me and I advised her to pursue it. If you believe I erred by allowing Abby to return to work, and now she's involved with her boss, you'd be completely mistaken. Mike is 62 years old, hairless, but more crucially, he is deeply committed to his wife and 5 children. Like I mentioned, something seemed slightly wrong, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was, and at that moment I didn't mind. I was eager for an evening of dancing with my wife and a whole night of romance afterward. We scattered around the room as we recognized several other couples who were there. If you dance skillfully enough, you'll encounter some really pleasant individuals. One couple was an old college friend, Fred Abbott, and his wife Brenda. I paused to chat with them while Abby and the others walked to our table. I was about to join my wife when the music commenced, but suddenly a noise erupted at the door. A crowd assembled at the entrance and then dispersed. Brenda gasped. "What's the matter?" asked Fred. "Don't you recognize who it is?" Brenda held her breath. I glanced back and saw an extremely attractive man. He was only about 5'6" or 7, but, as the ladies would say, he was stunning. Both Fred and I showed our unawareness. "This is Brad Talbot," she exclaimed. "He and his fiancée, Rita Summers, are 2 of the biggest celebrities in Hollywood." "Oh yeah," Fred remarked and started peering past Brad. "I wonder if Rita Summers is here too." "John, on a scale of 1 to 10, Rita is at least a 15. Brenda playfully smacked her husband's arm. Keep dreaming. When I gazed at Brad, I instantly recognized him. He was one of my wife's favorite actors. I contemplated whether I could get her an autograph, but what happened next completely shocked me. Brad approached our table and invited my wife to dance. Without hesitation, she stood up and danced with him for the next 4 songs. I strolled over to the table and sat down, utterly furious. My wife didn't even check if I was okay with her dancing with someone else. When the 5th song began, I intended to interfere, but just then, Chad's glass dropped to the floor. As he bent to collect the shattered glass, "John, could you lend me a hand with this?" he asked. I glanced at my dancing wife and then at Chad. I should have approached my wife, but instead I followed Chad to the men's restroom. However, when I arrived, the cut was very minor. Nevertheless, I assisted him in cleaning it and bandaging it with a paper towel. When I returned to the table, I merely caught a glimpse of my wife departing with Brad. I hurried after them, Chad tagging along close behind. As we reached the front door and into the parking lot, I saw Abby stepping into the car with Brad. I hastened to catch up with the car. The moment I saw Brad kissing Abby's hand while she laughed at something he mentioned, Chad tripped me. I fell to the ground but stood up immediately. "What the hell did you do?" I shouted. "Brad is just taking your wife for a spin," he said, grinning. Thelma appeared a few seconds later. "This is Abby's dream date," she informed Chad and me, explaining how much she admired Brad, so we agreed he should ask her out. "This is my wife," I yelled. "Didn't you think I should be informed about this? Abby told us you would refuse," Chad replied, grinning. "Just go with it. Go with the flow yourself," I yelled, lunging and striking Chad right on the bridge of his nose. The sound of his nose breaking was the only satisfying moment of the night. Thelma then rushed at me, throwing punches and attempting to kick me. Fortunately, Fred noticed what was happening and followed me. He quickly pulled Thelma away and placed her on the other side of him. "He attacked my husband," Thelma began screaming. "No, he didn't do it," Fred responded calmly. "You two attacked him first. He was merely defending himself." Thelma became enraged and dialed 911. The police arrived about 10 minutes later and started recording statements. Fred continued his account, and I recounted the same details, mentioning that Chad had struck me in the legs first. The bystanders who had assembled after the disturbance saw only Thelma attack me. They informed the officers that all they had observed was me attempting to escape from her. Chad and Thelma were ultimately detained by the time the police departed. I was heartbroken. I returned to our table and noticed 2 women grinning. "Where is everyone else?" Helen inquired. "Chad and Thelma were detained for attacking me," I answered, doing my best to suppress my anger. Abby had left with Brad and appeared quite pleased about it. "This shouldn't have happened," Anna remarked. She had just stepped outside with Brad to snap a few photos before returning to the table. My wife and Thelma clearly hadn't disclosed the actual plan, I noted as I rose to get a drink. Fred caught up with me at the bar. "Are you going to be okay?" he questioned. "I have no idea what is happening," I confessed. "I hope my wife has just gone for a drive with this movie star and returns soon. When she does, we will have a very stern conversation." "Look, John," Fred stated with concern, "I don't want to stir trouble, but Brenda informed me that Brad Talbot is a well-known philanderer. He appears to relish affairs with married women. I hope this doesn't concern Abby, but I believe you should prepare for the worst." My heart sank. Unsure of what to do, I assured Fred I would manage before returning to the table. I attempted to contact Abby on her cell phone. The call went directly to voicemail. The atmosphere felt quite tense. When I sat down, the wives appeared very embarrassed, and their husbands seemed furious. I kept trying to contact Abby unsuccessfully. Eventually, 2 other couples mentioned they were heading back to the hotel. I decided to stay longer to see if Abby would return. I waited half an hour before heading to the hotel. There, I waited until 3 a.m., calling Abby's phone every 10 minutes. Finally, in frustration, I checked out and drove home. I arrived around 4 a.m. and sat on the couch. I must have dozed off because the sunlight shining through our bay window woke me. It was already 7 in the morning. I checked our bedroom, but Abby hadn't come back yet. Then I checked my cell phone. There were no messages from Abby. So I logged into my computer and opened our Facebook page. It was flooded with photos of Brad and Abby leaving a nightclub, pictures of them entering his house, pictures of Abby walking into Brad's house on his arm. I scoured Hollywood websites, and they all highlighted Brad's latest affair with a married woman. At that moment, I was overcome with fury. I immediately called my lawyer, and since it was Saturday, my call was redirected to his home. He wasn't too pleased about my call until I explained the situation. He advised me not to take any action until Abby came home and explained her behavior. Finally, around 11, the front door opened, and Abby walked in with a broad smile on her face, which vanished when she noticed my expression. "We didn't do anything," Abby immediately said. "We just spent the night talking. I know I should have asked you, but I was certain you would say no. You know how much I adore movies, and Brad Talbot is one of my favorite actors. Last night was like a fairy tale." "Nothing happened, John. I still love you with all my heart." I just stared at her, feeling the steam nearly coming out of my ears. "I need you to gather your belongings and leave for your parents' house, because I can't bear to see you at the moment, John. Why do you exaggerate things so much?" she inquired, her tone laced with annoyance and a hint of fear. "We were merely having a conversation. It was nothing noteworthy." "It truly doesn't matter. This is incredibly significant to me," I declared, gritting my teeth. "I don't trust for a minute that nothing transpired, but just to argue, let's assume nothing did. You still humiliated me in front of everyone."
"Now you're simply being melodramatic, John," Abby retorted, placing her hands on her waist. "Outside our circle, nobody is aware, and Helen and Anna understand that to me, it was merely an innocent escapade." "You fool," I blurted out, causing Abby to flinch. I had never spoken to her like that before. "This is the headline news on all Hollywood media outlets. They have photos of you and Brad exiting the nightclub, heading to his residence, and by now they probably have images of you leaving his place this morning. I believe our marriage is finished, so pack your things."
"And leave before I do something I'll regret." "Please, John, I'm certain you're overreacting," Abby pleaded, now close to tears. "I love you wholeheartedly. Sorry if I upset you, but truly, nothing occurred. I knew it would annoy you, but I thought you'd overlook it once you learned nothing happened. We need to sort this out." "Then think about the girls. You didn't consider your daughters when you dashed off into the night with your celebrity fool," I hissed at her. "Would you like Stacy or Gail to do something similar when they grow up?" Abby turned white at these words and then began to weep. "I'm terribly sorry, John. I didn't realize it would matter so much," I erred. "Please forgive me." "You're correct. I didn't think." I was beside myself with anger, growing more furious by the minute. I needed to get Abby out of the house before I did something I deeply regretted. So I left her in the hallway and went to our bedroom. I took a suitcase from the closet and started tossing Abby's clothes into it. "I'll handle it," Abby said through her tears, after a few moments. She then slowly packed her suitcase and took it downstairs. I didn't even help her with it. I waited until she was through the front door before slamming it shut. I watched from the window to ensure she had left. I saw her place her bag in the trunk and sit in the driver's seat. Then she rested her head on the steering wheel and began to cry. I didn't want to go out and comfort her. I was too furious. About 20 minutes later, she started the car and drove off. I immediately phoned my parents and explained the situation to them. I asked if they could keep the girls a bit longer and to inform Abby that I had them. If she showed up, they consented. I was then left alone to ponder the wreckage of our marriage. I replayed everything over and over in my mind. Abby insisted that nothing occurred. Could this be true? I doubted it, but my instinct told me she was deceitful. Could I accept what she did and try to move on, assuming, as she thought, that only our friends knew about it now that it had become public? I saw no future for our marriage. I longed for vengeance against both of them, but couldn't devise a plan to achieve it. I wept for at least an hour, banging on walls and doors as I paced through the house. I felt utterly helpless. I knew I couldn't confront Brad. He was a Hollywood big shot, and touching him was impossible. I realized a divorce would harm me financially, but if it came to that, I was ready to work from home and fight for full custody of the girls, since I was clearly the more stable parent. I felt like I had a solid chance at it around 1 in the afternoon. I was just brewing more coffee when the telephone sounded. Up to that point, the press hadn't gotten my phone number, but I knew that wouldn't last. "Hello," I answered the call. "This is John Sawyer, and your wife's name is Abby," a female voice inquired. "Listen," I retorted sharply. "I'm not in the mood to talk to journalists." There was a soft laugh, reminiscent of the chime of bells. "Okay," the voice responded. "I dislike talking to them." "Who is this?" I asked, ready to end the call. "My name is Rita Sue," she replied softly. "I believe you've met my fiancé Brad Talbot." "Yes, I know him," I said. I recognized the fool. I didn't grasp where this conversation was headed. But I wanted to finish it swiftly. "Do you love your wife?" Rita posed her query, which confused me. I exhaled. Despite everything my wife has done, I still love her. However, after all that has occurred, I don't believe there's any chance to salvage our marriage. I just can't accept what she did. If I could present a way to potentially rescue your marriage and also salvage my relationship with Brad, would you be interested? My heart started to flutter unevenly. I had to sit down and ponder. At last I said, yes, I would like to save my marriage, but I can't see any method to do so. Another soft chuckle came, followed by a sigh. I've loved Brad for many years. We've known each other since we were kids. He hails from a very troubled family. Like me, his father was unfaithful, and as a result, his mother despised all men. She never showed Brad any affection. Nothing he did ever pleased his mother. He has been involved with married women numerous times before. I think this is Brad's way of seeking the affection his mother never provided. Similarly, in my family, my mother was an alcoholic and my father was abusive. Brad's father was all I had back then, and I adored him deeply, but then he left when his mother divorced his father. I wept for weeks. We reconnected in Hollywood after we both became celebrities. I had heard tales about Brad and was cautious about getting involved with him, but as soon as we reunited, we fell in love again. When we got engaged, he assured me that his affairs with married women were over. When I asked him about your wife, he claimed that nothing had occurred. I have no proof either way, but right now, the thought of losing Brad is making me anxious. Yes, my wife also assured me that nothing happened, I confessed, and the thought of losing her makes me anxious too. Do you trust her? No, I don't know. And I don't know either. I am familiar with Brad, and it would be totally unlike him to invite a woman to his home and do nothing, but I suppose stranger things have occurred. However, I am assuming that something did happen, so I wanted to comprehend the hurt he caused me, and I want your wife to understand the same. I don't know if it will be enough, but I hope that if we are successful, we can proceed with our couples. I'm with you for now, I declared. How do you plan to achieve this? I'm not going to do this alone, we'll do it together, Rita replied. You'll have to spell it out because I don't see how I can do anything. First things first, she stated, to get the most out of what I aim to do, I need you to gradually initiate a dialogue with your wife towards a possible reconciliation. I'm going to do the same with Brad. I'm not speaking to him at present. I'd say in 2 to 3 weeks, I'll start talking to Brad, and you should let your wife move in with you around the same time. I'll let you know when you will still keep your distance, and you should not sleep with her. Why would I let her back into the house? I questioned. Because as soon as she arrives home, we will meet, and I will explain my plan. I still have some pieces of my plan that I want to consider, Rita explained. I still wasn't sure about it, but I didn't have any ideas, so I decided to proceed with it. The first thing I did was call my parents and tell them that I would collect the girls in half an hour. I then called my administrative assistant, Joni, and informed her that I would be working remotely for the coming week. I could discern from her tone that she already knew the saga about Brad and my Abby. She was very supportive and told me to inform her if there was anything she could do to assist. Finally, I contacted Abby's parents at their residence. Abby's father answered the phone and was very remorseful. He had seen some of the reports on the news and felt ashamed, but he was extremely relieved when I requested to speak with Abby. She burst into tears on the phone, apologizing profusely and expressing her desire to return home so we could discuss it. Listen, Abby, I said calmly, I think it would be beneficial for us to spend some time apart for a while. Next week I'm going to work remotely, and you will have to work from Monday to Wednesday. Why don't you pick up the girls on Wednesday night? Then we'll discuss everything. I plan to pick up the girls on Sunday evening, please. John, she pleaded, I want to go home now. I want us to be a family again. You don't want us to be a family anymore. I thought we were family, I replied sadly, but then you made me question everything we had. I'll see you on Wednesday evening. Say around 5, I picked up the girls and informed them that Mum would be staying a few days with their grandparents. They were curious about why, but the topic faded when we went to McDonald's. The girls played games for 2 or 3 hours, and then we had dinner there. The phone rang just as we arrived home. I checked the caller ID but didn't recognize it. When I answered, the reporter inquired if I wished to comment on my wife's affair with Brad Talbot. I hung up the phone after that. The phone rang every 5 minutes. I finally disconnected and left it around 6. My cell phone rang. It was Abby. Why don't you answer phone calls? She demanded immediately. Because they are just reporters wanting me to comment on your affair with Brad Talbot. There's no romance, Abby, I insisted. I told you nothing happened. Well then, you need to tell the rest of the world about it, because for some reason they don't believe it, I replied sarcastically. There was dead silence on the other end of the line. Abby then asked if she could talk to the girls, so I put them on the phone and sat listening to their side of the conversation. They talked about their day at McDonald's. Finally, Stacy handed me the phone and said that my mum wanted to speak to me. Abby again pleaded to be allowed to come home. I need more time, I told her. On Wednesday night, Abby arrived around 4 instead of 5. I was slightly annoyed that she had disregarded my instructions, but I decided to leave everything as it was. The girls were elated to see her, and Abby smothered them with kisses. When she came towards me to kiss me, I stepped back. She looked at me with hurt and irritation. "So this is how it will be now," she said irritably. "If that's the case, maybe I should just take the girls and leave if that's what you want to do," I replied calmly and walked away. "No, John," Abby said quickly, with a hint of panic in her voice. "I think we should sit down and talk about our issues." The girls went to pack their overnight bags because Abby told them they would be visiting their grandparents. "What are we going to do?" Abby asked after an awkward silence. "I wish I knew," I replied. "Right now I am hurt, humiliated, and angry. Any suggestions on how I can get rid of the big three? All I can do is apologize," Abby said, trembling slightly. "I made a colossal mistake. Please forgive me." "I do not want to lose you, Abby. It's not that simple," I said, leaning back and crossing my arms over my chest. "The whole world views me as a cuckold. My wife cheated on me, and I didn't do anything about it. I never wanted to hurt you." Abby wept. "I was thrilled to meet Brad Talbot and visit his residence. I realized you might be slightly irritated with me, but I never anticipated such chaos." "Abby, I truly hope we can resolve this," I remarked, and her expression momentarily brightened. "However, I must also inform you that I have sought legal advice in case this leads to a separation. I intend to pursue sole custody of the girls, and I suggest you appoint an attorney for yourself. I don't want a separation," she sobbed, "and I won't allow you to take my daughters." "Abby, I'm not insisting we'll separate, but we must consider the worst scenario," I explained. Although it was a falsehood, I added, "I'm not aiming to harm you. But bear in mind that your recent fame might make the court more inclined to grant my custody request." "Please don't," Abby pleaded. "I'll do everything to reunite us." "Why not continue our conversation?" I proposed. "In fact, how about we lunch next Sunday when you pass the girls to me? What if I choose to keep the girls?" she retorted, anger evident in her tone. "I dislike shuffling them back and forth. It's not beneficial for them. If you proceed, I'll have no option but to initiate divorce proceedings immediately. And recall, you compromised your reputation," I cautioned. "The court will likely disfavor an adulterous mother with impressionable daughters at that." All resistance left Abby. "I won't do it. I don't want a divorce." At the start of the following week, I returned to my office where my assistants showed considerable empathy. Some clients, particularly two, found humor in my situation and mocked me. I respectfully requested they drop the subject, yet they persisted in ridiculing me. "I've had enough," I declared, deciding to end our association and transfer their accounts to a different firm. Despite their apologies, I made it clear our professional relationship was terminated. Soon, no one mentioned my wife and Brad anymore. Around 2 p.m., Rita called. "Do you have plans tonight?" she inquired. Upon my negative response, she announced, "Great, because you're dining with me at Zoom Zoom restaurant at 7. Tie and jacket required." Then she disconnected. I was astonished to learn she had secured a booking at Zoom Zoom, the city's most prestigious eatery, notoriously hard to reserve and costly. I arrived at 7 p.m. and was ushered into a secluded room in the back, furnished with a single table and a luxurious velvet couch. Brief visions of potential happenings on that couch crossed my mind. Shortly after, the door opened and Rita Summers walked in. As I stood, her presence was breathtaking. I was certain her entrance would have captivated the entire restaurant. She appeared to be around 5'4", with long blonde hair, soft brown eyes, and a stunning physique. Her smile was particularly magnetic. I could not fathom why Brad would be unfaithful to a woman of her allure. "May I call you John?" she proposed, taking a seat across from me. I nodded and inquired how I might contact her. "Rita, of course," she replied, her light laugh making me smile. We ordered beverages and spent time conversing. I shared a bit about my profession, but mainly entertained her with amusing anecdotes about my daughters and tales of my youth as an awkward teenager. Afterward, the waiter returned to take our meal orders. I was curious about Rita's intentions but didn't want to pressure her, eagerly awaiting her explanation. I didn't mind saving my marriage, but I had no clue how to do it. When we finished eating, she reclined in her chair. "First of all, John." Rita began with a melancholy smile. "That crafty snake, Chad Tompkins, orchestrated this whole chaos. He thinks of himself as a movie agent, but in fact, he's nothing more than a broker. He arranges for naive men and women to be exploited by film stars. You wouldn't believe how many people, particularly married women, end up sleeping with movie stars through Chad's arrangements. You're speaking to someone who has experienced this firsthand, I said with a snarl. However, I was unaware of what exactly Chad's role was. At least I managed to confront him physically. Really, Rita's eyes lit up. That's positive, but you really shouldn't be too harsh on your wife. I think Brad could seduce Mother Teresa by removing her undergarments. As you're aware, your wife isn't the first married woman to be enchanted by him, but I plan to make her the last. And if I can't achieve that, then what I'm offering will at least compensate him and your wife for the distress they caused us. I can't guarantee that after my plan is finished, either of us will remain with our loved ones. Yet despite this, we will experience the gratification of having revenged their deceit and falsehoods. I was slightly startled by Rita's readiness to forgive my wife. But I was pleased to learn there would be some sort of retribution. Now I just needed her to explain how we were going to execute it. What exactly are you suggesting? I inquired. Before I delve into the specifics, I just want to mention that you are an extremely handsome man, and you are also quite charming. I think your wife was unwise for risking your marriage. If we had met under different circumstances, I would be very interested in dating you. That's very generous of you, but we both understand that we inhabit utterly different worlds, and you are not only stunning but even more, you are exceptionally beautiful. You are very kind. You're right about our two different worlds, of course, but that doesn't alter the fact that I find you very attractive. Thank you, was all I managed to reply because I wanted to know the plan. So what are we going to do next? Within the next 2 weeks, I plan to become your client, Rita stated. I'm sorry, I don't follow client. Yes, you do provide financial guidance to your clients, don't you? Rita mentioned with a smile. Yes, of course, I responded, still puzzled about her intentions. Then, I plan to invest some money, she stated plainly. However, we will need to have 3 or 4 meetings to go over the agreements. I think 4 would be the ideal number. 2 of these meetings will take place in your office and 2 will be lunch meetings. I'll pick the locations myself. Okay, I replied, still uncertain why I was agreeing to this. I can open an account, but you have to invest at least $10,000. Oh, I intend to invest much more than that, she said, smiling even broader. Meanwhile, you won't tell your wife that I am your client. You will continue to meet with her and discuss reconciliation. In 2 weeks, you will allow her to move back home, but you will not share a bed with her. On the 15th of October, you and your wife will attend a gala evening which is crucially significant. This will be an evening for the charity that I helped establish and have been supporting for 5 years. Most people don't associate me with charity, and I appreciate that. I attend charity events every 2 years. I wouldn't have attended this year as I was at the last gala. However, I will be there, and you and your wife will be there too. Okay, I'll be with you at the charity gala. I agreed. I know for certain that tickets to this event cost $220,000 each. I can't justify spending that much money. Rita laughed again, then grinned. The tingling sensation traveled from the top of my head to my toes. Your tickets will be complimentary. Just tell your wife that a client gave them to you. I still didn't understand how this would achieve anything. Well, you see, John, part of the night's entertainment is the escort auction. Not that type of escort, she chuckled once more. We auction willing men to the women present. The woman or man who bids the highest for a person will place a sort of slave collar on him. Then the men are at the mercy of the women who paid for them. Rita spoke with a chuckle before she continued, explaining that most of the participants are bachelors, yet married men also join so their spouses can place bids on them. Occasionally, a married man is purchased by someone other than his wife. I gather these married men behave impeccably, as their wives would otherwise sever their genitals. However, at this year's gala, a married man will be sold, and his wife will not win the bid, and the events that follow will be far from innocent. There was still an expression of puzzlement on my face. Rita chuckled and patted my hand. You are a married man who will be up for auction, and I will place the winning bid. So you just need to rent a tuxedo, buy your wife a new gown, and join me. It suddenly became clear to me what Rita had planned, and it was ingenious. Both Brad and Abby were going to experience what it was like for us. Of course, I knew it was all for show, but just spending the evening with Rita Summers, while everyone assumed the worst could significantly impact. This would remove the burden from me and transfer it to Brad. Additionally, my wife would experience the same anguish and embarrassment that I endured. Then perhaps we could see a therapist and move past this. The next few weeks passed rapidly. The first time Rita entered my office, I thought all the women there were about to lose their composure. Our lunch gatherings were held in very secluded eateries. I didn't grasp why we met in secrecy when everything important could be discussed in my office. Mostly, we just shared anecdotes. These lunches were enjoyable, and I learned much about Rita and Brad. She genuinely adored him and would be heartbroken if. They separated, but she was ready to leave him if he persisted in his former behaviors. A week before the gala, I permitted Abby to return home, yet I informed her I would sleep in the guest room. She was sorrowful, but didn't protest. The Wednesday before the gala, I arrived home with the tickets and Abby's eyes sparkled. She raved about the celebrities who would attend, then reprimanded me for the expense. It didn't cost me anything, I explained. One of my clients offered me the tickets. I thought it would be an entertaining evening. By the way, I think you should buy a new dress, something fancy. Abby was overjoyed. I almost felt pity for her, but then I remembered that night when I thought we were set for a magical evening, only to end up embarrassed. It was her turn to feel my pain. When we arrived, there were already about 500 people there. As we checked in, I noticed a table for auction registration with a queue of men filling out forms. 5 striking men were in line, so I turned to Abby and suggested playfully, pointing to the table, "This is a charity event, and we didn't pay anything for the tickets. What do you say if I sign up and you can bid on me?" Abby giggled, though her laughter was not as delightful as Rita's. "I don't have any money, and I didn't even bring my wallet, because it wouldn't fit in this purse as Rita advised. I had brought cash. Here's $11,000. I doubt you'll need to spend more than that, but it's for a good cause, so bid at least $200. You know, you're worth $1,000, and far more," Abby commented with a broad grin. I joined the queue, and when it was my turn at the registration table, I filled out and signed the form. I glanced at the list and saw about 18 or 20 men registered. If I hadn't known it was a setup, I would never have had the nerve to participate. Just as I was about to walk away, the woman behind the counter asked, "Are you married?" I nodded, and she pulled out another form. "I hope your wife is with you, otherwise you won't be able to participate. She needs to complete this form and sign it." I summoned Abby over and clarified what was required. She promptly filled out the form. What Abby didn't comprehend, because she didn't peruse the form, was that she consented to let me do whatever the highest bidder requested. After finishing the paperwork, we went to find our table. Rita guided us to a table with 2 starlets, 1 television host, and 2 actors from a national soap opera. My wife was thrilled, not just by the people at our table, but also by the other celebrities at the gala. When the auction started, all the men who volunteered were called. I grinned at my wife and stood up. As it turned out, there were 24 participants, and I believe it was Rita's plan to have me go last. By the time I was the last one on stage, they had already collected over $300,000, and I must say that the bidding was energetic and enjoyable. "Our final contestant is local," announced the MC, a famous game show host named John Sawyer, who is married with 2 children. I'm certain his wife is emptying her piggy bank as we speak. "How about we start the bidding at $50? "I think it's worth at least $100, shouted an elderly lady in the front. "Can you wash dishes, honey?" I laughed and responded, "I can wash and dry," which elicited a loud chuckle from the crowd. "That's more than my husband can manage," exclaimed another elderly woman. "I'll bid $200. Then it became $500. Soon after, I heard Abby yell, "I'll bid $1,000. This caused everyone to celebrate, but almost instantly, a younger woman bid $2,000. Before I knew it, the bid had escalated to $5,000. I looked at Abby, and she was glancing around, utterly bewildered. I just shrugged. Soon, an offer of $10,000 came from the back of the hall, quickly followed by another for $155,000. If I hadn't known it was all orchestrated, I might have developed a headache. The bid reached $225,000, and I started to feel a bit nervous. I thought a few thousand would close the deal. It was far more than I anticipated. Finally, from the back of the room, I heard Rita's voice bid $100,000. The room fell into stunned silence, not just because of the amount, but also because it was Rita who made the bet. Rita Summers walked down close to the stage as the crowd erupted. She smiled at me, turned to the audience, and said, "And I don't even care if he knows how to wash dishes." Roars and cheers filled the room again. I must confess, I blushed significantly. Rita approached, placed a traditional collar around my neck, and kissed me tenderly on the lips on stage. By prior agreement, we returned to where Abby was sitting. She was astonished and didn't know what to say or do, so I shrugged and said, "Well, I didn't plan this, Abby, but don't worry, it probably won't occur. Here are the car keys. As far as I understand the rules, I am Miss Summers's escort for the next 12 hours, possibly longer. See you at home tomorrow, Rita," and I danced several dances at the gala evening, during which she kept whispering in my ear. I noticed Abby watching us with a deer in the headlights look. When Rita took my arm and pressed her chest against mine as we walked out of the ballroom, I saw Abby's lips quiver. After the gala, Rita took me in a limousine to another nightclub. We danced and talked there for an hour. After that, we attended a private screening of a new film. The theater was exclusive to Hollywood A-listers. I thought the movie was terrible. Rita agreed, but when we spoke to the director, we were both impressed with him. The limousine then took us to a very run-down part of town. After the car stopped, I noticed there were 2 cars parked behind us. Rita mentioned that they were part of her security detail. She pointed to 2 decrepit houses on opposite sides of the street. The one with the porch light still on was once my residence. Brad lived in the house across from it. It wasn't such a shabby area back then, but it was still quite run down. It was about 3 in the morning when we finally arrived at Rita's apartment. She revealed that she owns 6 apartments, 1 in Hollywood, 1 in New York, 1 in New York, 1 in Florida, 2 in Europe, and 1 in South America. This specific apartment was 3 stories high and could accommodate 2 average-sized homes. We entered the office and Rita handed me a drink. As I sat on the couch, I began to laugh. It's unfortunate that I didn't have a camera to capture a photo of Abby. I almost feel guilty for doing this, though not entirely. Rita sat very close to me and placed her hand on my knee. "John, tell me honestly, did your wife convince you that nothing occurred? None of us will ever be able to confirm it, but I believe they were involved," I said sadly. "That's why it still pains me so much. I know, John, and I'm 99.9% certain that Brad spent a night with your wife," Rita stated angrily at the thought. "I think this twist is acceptable." With those words, Rita leaned in and kissed me gently. I was surprised by this gesture. I had assumed that we would head to Rita's house and sleep in separate rooms, everyone assuming we slept together, but we would know the truth. Now, she was presenting herself to me. It didn't take long for me to decide. I suppose if I were a better man, I would decline, but I was still wounded by what my wife had done. Plus, who in their sane mind would refuse a chance to be with Rita Summers? We kissed on the sofa for about 20 minutes. It was thrilling to be so near to such a stunningly beautiful woman. Finally, she took my hand and led me to her bedroom. Once inside, Rita started a slow striptease. From the first kiss, it was difficult. I wish Abby would do something like that. For me, I would love to wake up like this sometimes. After Rita brought me to climax, we made love again. Then, I glanced at my watch and realized it was almost 11 p.m. I should have been home by now, I said. Rita chuckled at my perplexed expression. "Remember, your wife wasn't concerned when you were waiting for her at home, and remember, nothing happened," I laughed, and we took a shower together. After drying off and getting dressed, Rita made eggs for me while she waited for the limousine to pick me up. On the way home, I finally found peace, thinking if Abby had wanted to, we could now work on moving past everything. When I entered our house, I found Abby crying in the living room. "I wasn't sure you'd come back," she said sorrowfully. "The news is buzzing that Rita Summers paid $100,000 to spend a night with you. At first, I thought it was just retaliation, but then I saw the way she looked at you. If she spent that much, she must truly care about you, but I don't hold you accountable for what you did. Do we have any?" "Future first of all, Abby," I lied. "Nothing happened," I replied. She looked at me almost with fury in her eyes, but then it faded. "Really, Rita is my new client," I told my wife. She felt it was justified, considering what Brad did to me. Besides, R is the one who gave me the tickets. She usually makes anonymous donations of $100,000 each year. This year, Rita made it public to send a message to her fiancé. So you're right, it was to get back at Brad. Whether we have a future or not depends on you. If you're prepared to work on our marriage and attend counseling, I am too." Abby ran into my arms and I kissed her deeply. Then I took her to our bedroom. I don't know where I found the strength, but we made love twice. I then went back to sleep until my 2 daughters jumped on me around 2 p.m. We had a quiet dinner with the girls, and after they went to bed, Abby and I sat on our patio holding hands. I knew then that we could rebuild our marriage. Abby and I found a competent counselor, Wendy, who was very effective in addressing our issues. Surprisingly, Wendy was much stricter with Abby. I presume that, since she was a woman, she would lean more towards my wife, but she pointed out that Abby was considering taking time away from her marriage, whereas I wasn't, even though we both insisted that nothing happened. I don't believe Wendy trusted either of us, but she mentioned that merely choosing to leave our partners for someone else constituted infidelity. Abby turned quite red during much of the conversation. Wendy somewhat excused my actions because she perceived my situation as a form of retaliation by Rita against her fiancé. This was indeed the case, but what Wendy was unaware of was my deep involvement in orchestrating and carrying out these plans. However, the meetings proved beneficial. There is one drawback: Abby has developed a dislike for going to the cinema. She no longer enjoys watching films on television either. Nonetheless, she will attend children's movies with her friends if they wish to go. Regarding Chad and Thelma, I have withdrawn the allegations against Thelma. I explained to the authorities that she believed she was defending her husband. However, I allowed the charges against Chad to proceed, and he served 3 months in the county detention center. Chad and Thelma were expelled from our group, and Abby no longer communicates with Thelma after a severe argument, blaming her for nearly destroying our marriage. I won't claim to grasp my wife's reasoning. Rita and Brad celebrated their union in what was dubbed the wedding of the century, with over 1,000 attendees. If you weren't invited, you were considered insignificant in Hollywood. Abby and I weren't invited, but I did send Brad a wedding gift, a pair of bullhorns with a note stating, "Leave my wife alone, and I'll leave yours alone." I was still upset with Brad when I mailed the antlers, but Rita informed me that Brad found the gift amusing and displayed it in his office beneath a framed version of the note. However, given the nature of Hollywood, their marriage ended within a year. True to her promise, Rita divorced him after discovering his return to pursuing married women, yet they remained friends. It's unfortunate because Rita genuinely loved him, as she had expressed over their years together, sharing a connection deeper than most, but evidently it wasn't sufficient. Rita is still a client of mine. When she first opened her account, she deposited $1 million. I anticipated she would close the account after her planned retribution was complete, but instead, Rita maintained it. When the balance reached $1.5 million, she added another $2 million. I haven't met her in person since the day after the gala, but we speak at least 4 times a year to discuss her investments. Occasionally she calls to inquire about her account, but other times just to chat. I particularly enjoy these discussions. Rita is an astute businesswoman and, surprisingly, quite cautious with her investments. Even when updating her portfolio quarterly, after a brief 20-minute review, we spend the next hour or two discussing our personal lives. After divorcing Brad, Rita joked that she should have pursued me instead, and since then, she has teased me about keeping an eye on me. It's her hypothetical plan that, should I ever find myself alone and she decides to stop playing the field, she'll do whatever it takes to be with me. I know it's all in jest, but it's a nice fantasy to entertain. Abby and I are nearing our 10th wedding anniversary. We've experienced our share of challenges, but overall, it has been a wonderful marriage. Reflecting on it, I'm convinced that if Rita hadn't intervened, I might have ended my marriage with Abby. Today, I can't fathom life without her. Oh, and one more thing: Abby is expecting, and we are going to have a little boy. I'm eagerly anticipating this new chapter. What are your thoughts on our tale today? In my view, the wife was completely unjustified in meeting her favorite actor without her husband's knowledge, which temporarily strained their marriage. What's your perspective? Please share your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next video.